97.
Get ready for New York's hottest talk on radio. Street Soldiers is on the air. Let your voice be heard. Street Soldiers addresses the issues that matter to you. Hot 97 Street Soldiers with Lisa Maria.
And tonight, East Coast rap versus West Coast. Has the rivalry gone too far? Telephone number 1-800-223-9797. Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Maria, host of Street Soldiers, your talk forum for the real issues. Heard every Sunday night from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. right here on 97.1 FM, Hot 97. Tonight, we're going to get into a supposed beef that the hip-hop nation from both coasts and in the middle has been talking about for many, many months. East Coast rap versus West Coast rap. Some observers of the scene say that the not-so-friendly competition of who has more hits, more money, and more awards has turned into a deadly rivalry so terrifying that many in the business don't even want to comment, presumably out of fear for their very lives. In fact, some of the artists and producers who you often hear on Hot 97 when they drop by the studio to talk about their new singles or albums or various projects declined to talk about this. For example, Sean Puffy Combs, CEO of Bad Boy Entertainment, George Price, the PR person for Death Row Records, and many others that we tried to contact, including someone very notorious and very B.I.G. Well, what is it all about? How about the undisputed title of Master of the Hip-Hop Universe? But instead of bumping the competition off the charts, they could get bumped off for real. At least that's what the word on the streets is. Two of the key players, Sean Puffy Combs, CEO of, who we mentioned, of New York-based Bad Boy Entertainment, and Suge Knight, CEO of the LA-based Death Row Records. But there are others who are key players like Tupac Shakur, who may be involved as well. Is this a real rivalry, or is this just a big media hype in order to sell records? We'd like to know what you think about East Coast versus West Coast. 1-800-223-9797. And here to tell us more about it is writer Kevin Powell from Vibe magazine. You can check out his cover story live from Death Row in the February issue of Vibe. And he's the one, if you remember a while back, who interviewed Tupac while he was in jail. Kevin, thanks a lot for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
How you doing?
I'm all right.
All right. Listen, what do you think about this whole East Coast versus West Coast rivalry? Because in your story in Vibe magazine, you talk a lot about Death Row and how it got started with Dre and with Suge Knight. But you also you keep coming back to this theme of East Coast versus West Coast. Why are people paying so much attention to this?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, those of us who've been around the hip-hop scene for a while, know that it hasn't always been like this. I mean, if you go back to the 1980s, you can look at old tour schedules and see people like Ice-T, Digital Underground, NWA, JJ Fat touring with groups from the East Coast, and there was a lot of love going back and forth. And I feel like this is just something, I don't know exactly where it started, but it's something that's just grown out of control. And it's really like tribalism, you know what I'm saying? And it within the hip-hop nation, and it's just not, to me, conducive to the hip-hop nation surviving, wherever it came from. It just needs to stop, really, because it shouldn't be about East Coast or West Coast or who's putting out the most records or making the most money or whatever, because we're all supposed to be part of the hip-hop nation.
But now you talk about in the article, you mentioned that there were a lot of people that you spoke to, and in the course of writing the cover story, that that did not want to speak on the record, that were these people that you had expected would make some kind of comment, and were you surprised that not too many people wanted to talk?
Well, I mean, there's a definite fear factor going around with this thing right now. People obviously don't want to step on certain toes, or maybe feeling that they're going to get, I don't know I don't know what they're thinking, but a lot of people just seem to be really scared. It wasn't just artists; it was people, who are executive types and people who can make some serious decisions or make some moves about what's going on. So that was a trip to me,
Now, to tell us, how did it come to be that somebody connected with Sean Puffy Combs was connected with the death of one of Suge Knight's bodyguards?
I really can't speak on that because, a lot of this stuff, like I said in the article, thrives on rumors, you know what I'm saying? And it's just like, no one really wants to talk about it. All we could do is go on what we heard down from Atlanta with, a little bit of what Sean said to us, a little bit about, what Suge said to us, and basically that's that, you know what I mean? And a lot of it's rumors, you know. So it's hard to say what exactly is going on. Now, I don't want to filter the airways with more rumors than that's already been out there. You know, all I can say is that it doesn't need to get to the point where people are now, you know, passing death threats back and forth, and people are scared to go to the West Coast or come to the East Coast or whatever the case may be, because that's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, but I can respect that. But what about the role of Tupac in all of this?
Well, I mean, you know, I have a separate interview with him in here in the magazine, and I think, you know, what I suggest is I really think that if Tupac could, you know, understand, first of all, he's not even from the West Coast, he's from the East Coast, you know what I'm saying? But it's just like, you know, we really need to, I asked him the question in the article, you know, why can't we just get together as black men and try to resolve this thing? And he said yellow M&Ms and green M&Ms don't sit down. I mean, now, as far as I know, they still come out of the same bag, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but and then he went on with the M&M peanuts don't roll with M&M plain.
I mean, it's tribalism, you know what I mean? If anyone understands anything about, you know, what's happened with black people in this country historically, we've always been into this, there's always been this divide and conquer thing, man, and that's all it is, you know what I mean? Because, I mean, if you really want to break it down logically, we don't own the West Coast nor the East Coast, man. That ain't even none of that turf we own, you know? So it's like, it's real stupid to me, you know? It's stupid, really, to be having this conversation more I think about it.
Yeah, well, you can't be saying that. You did a whole cover story for the magazine on it.
Yeah, but it was the most frustrating thing to do, you know what I mean? Because it's like I'm writing a story and stuff like that, and the magazine has been selling like crazy, and, you know, but it's frustrating because I have a love for black people, and I hate to see this kind of thing going on, you know what I'm saying?
Well, do you think that this is part of the, do you think it's a media hype that's created to sell records?
I don't know. You know, if it is, man, I hope it ain't that, because that says, again, that people are just not paying attention to what's going on with black people in our communities, and we don't have time for, you know, this kind of garbage to be happening, man, because a lot of kids who are not even in the industry are feeding into it now, you know what I'm saying? It's like people, regular kids in New York and regular kids on the West Coast are like, you know, I can't stand them kids from the East Coast. I can't stand them kids from the West Coast. So even if it is a media hype to sell records, these artists and these executives are being mad irresponsible if that's the case. Because now you got a whole bunch of young black kids around the country feeling like, you know, well, if anybody from that part of the country comes over here, we're going to rough them up. And that's stupid, you know what I'm saying?
What about the comments that were made at the Source Awards? Was that just joking around?
I don't know. You have to ask Suge Knight that. You know, he said he felt that's what he felt. You know what I mean? I don't know if that was the smartest thing to do. You know, I don't know if I would go out to the West Coast and, you know, diss people like that. But that's how he wants to roll. You know what I'm saying? And I didn't think that was wise. You know, I mean.
And just for people who don't know what we're talking about, that was at the Source Awards, which were here in New York City.
Yeah, when he, you know, he dissed Puffy, and I just wasn't wise to me, man. You know, we're all out here trying to do our thing, and it didn't make any sense. It really didn't make any sense. And it's like, but I'm not trying to, I think it's both sides, because on the other hand, a lot of us in New York, and I got, you know, we definitely know where hip-hop came from and everything, but at the same time, we have to be clear and understand that hip-hop is international. It's all over the world, you know what I mean? And so no one group of people control hip-hop, and I think one of the beefs with the West Coast has about the East Coast is that they feel like a lot of us don't give them any respect, and I can understand it. I've been out there many, many times, and, you know, I guess kids at a certain point get tired of people calling them country and saying they wear jerry curls and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying? I can understand where they're coming from. You know, they want to roll like that out there. That's their business. We don't need to diss them because of that, you know.
Kevin, what about in terms of sales?
It's obvious that over the last couple of years, with the influence of people like Dr. Dre and Snoop, that, you know, a lot of artists from the West Coast have been selling a lot of records, you know what I mean? And it's just like, that's pretty obvious, you know. And also, it seems that the West Coast supports its acts a lot more than we support our acts here on the East Coast, you know. And a West Coast act really doesn't have to sell on the East Coast to go platinum. I mean, that's obvious, man. That's real obvious from some of the things that have happened in the last couple of years, you know. And so, I mean, I think that's just, I don't know what that says about New York, because, I mean, there's a lot of dope acts that come out of New York, like Nas and people like that. You know, we don't be supporting them. We really need to be supporting them, you know, and I think that's a serious commentary on the East Coast, at least on the New York scene. You know, outside of Biggie, we haven't really had an act on a level of Snoop in a long time, you know, and that's troubling to me in terms of how we don't support our own local acts, but then we'll be the first ones to claim East Coast, you know.
Where do you put Wu-Tang in all this?
Oh, Wu-Tang is dope, you know what I'm saying? Wu-Tang, thank God for the Wu-Tang Clan, you know what I'm saying? You know, they're one of the more innovative acts out here, you know what I'm saying? But I still feel like their record sales should be more than what it is, you know what I mean, given what they've done, you know, for hip-hop, you know, just being a self-contained unit that writes and produces and is able to put out ODB and Method Man and, you know, all the other kids that come out of the Wu-Tang Clan. But we still don't to me, they should be bigger. They should be as big as Death Row right now. You know, if we really put our support behind the way those kids support Death Row out there on the West Coast.
What about the you talk in your article in Vibe magazine a little bit about Suge Knight, the head of Death Row Records, the CEO and the chairman. You talk a little bit about how he understood from the very beginning, from a street sense, look, we got to own this stuff from point go.
Well, I mean, that's clear. I think a lot of kids getting into the business now don't, you know, a lot of us don't understand, you know, that it's not just about getting a record deal or having a production deal with a major. You gotta have some control, because if you don't control, then people can just drop you anytime they feel like it. And we've seen a lot of examples of that. I mean, Time Warner might have been able to say, okay, we don't want to do an Interscope anymore because y'all got Death Row on there, stuff like that. But, you know, Death Row is the better off for it because Suge Knight owns those masters, and I think that's clear. I mean, he's a smart businessman, you know, and I think people need to learn from that part of what he does, you know, how important it is to try to have as much control as possible, because we do create this culture, we create this art form, and a lot of us get ripped off in the final analysis.
What do you think the effect on both the East Coast and the West Coast has been of the attacks by Senator Bob Dole, the former Education Secretary Bill Bennett?
Well, I would have
people
hoped
like
that
Dolores Tucker coming out that rap and hip hop are basically the end of the world.
I mean, the irony of it all is you would have hoped that those kind of attacks from these political figures, and it's going to continue during this presidential election, I guarantee that, you would have hoped that that would have united the hip hop nation. But it seems like during the course of all these attacks, we've become more divided. You know what I mean? It's like, and that works to the benefit of people like Bob Dole and C. Dolores Tucker, because then ultimately they can just attack, you know, one by one, because we don't have a united team together as far as a hip hop community is concerned, and that's detrimental to the future of hip hop as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, 1-800-223-9797. The show is Street Soldiers. Tonight we're talking about East Coast rap versus West Coast. Has the rivalry gone too far? Let us know how you feel. 1-800-223-9797. Our special guest tonight, writer Kevin Powell. He's the one responsible for that cover story on the February issue of Vibe magazine. And let's go right now to Frank Middleton from the Boogie Down Bronx, a concerned fan. Frank, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
What do you think about this whole East Coast versus West Coast thing?
I think East Coast was doing their thing, and the West Coast was all right, too.
And what about Tupac? What do you think about Tupac?
Yeah, I think Tupac, he's a hypocrite, you know, but he does his thing, you know, he's unpredictable. He's very unpredictable what he want to do, be on the East Coast or the West Coast.
You think he's a traitor to the East Coast?
Not really a traitor, but I think he's just doing what he got to do, you know?
And that he's not really down with the people here?